This is Legacy Battle. Make sure you hit like and subscribe, whatever you're listening on. I'm Michael Adams, creator of Legacy Battle. My panelists tonight from the Gridiron Battle Zone, Brian King, Penn State Collegiate All-Star, Kevin Adams, and from Steelers Nation South, Rollo Coughlin. Well, he'll be here in a few minutes. Our special guest tonight, we're joined by a heavyweight boxer. He's got 54 total fights, 47 wins, 36 by KO. He's won the New England Golden Gloves. He's the winner of that. He's fought guys like J.B. Williamson, Butterbean, Tyson, you name it. The man has fought everyone you could think of. We got Peter McNeely here. Peter, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So we're gonna have a Q&A for Peter after we discuss a few boxers. Tonight's gonna be the GOAT of the 1990s, the greatest of all time there. And we're gonna start with Brian.
All right. So got Riddick Bowe. Riddick Bowe, he stood at 6'5", weighed in about 240 pounds, and he had an 81-inch reach. He was really coming into his own just as the 1990s decade began. He started the decade off right by winning 18 consecutive bouts against guys like former heavyweight champions Pinklin Thomas and Tony Tubbs and top contender Tyrell Biggs. This earned him a shot at the heavyweight title. In November of 1992, Bowe was able to defeat the undisputed champion, Evander Holyfield, by unanimous decision. This gave him the IBF, WBC, and WBA world titles. But Bowe actually dumped his WBC belt in the trash can about a month later after being frustrated with his manager and the commission in regards to a potential match with Lennox Lewis. Lewis later explained that he believed Bowe's manager, Rock Newman, was afraid to allow Bowe to fight Lewis. Lewis is quoted as saying, "I know that if it was up to Riddick Bowe to make that choice, I think maybe he would have chose to fight me because we are warriors and gladiators." After a couple of successful title defenses, Bowe finally barely lost to Holyfield in their rematch. I say barely because one judge called the fight even, one called it by a round, one called it by two. And then there was some, during the fight, there was some knucklehead who crashed a hang glider into the ring. So he was obviously distracted. So then Bowe's next three matches were all against undefeated boxers, and he won them all, including one against Herbie Hyde, which earned him back the WBO title. Then he rematched Holyfield and became the first boxer to ever KO him. After a couple of battles with Andrew Galata, which ended on DQs, Bowe decided to retire in 1997 at just the age of 29. He tried a couple of comebacks several years later, but never really returned to form. Still, he ended his career with a 43-1 record, 33 KOs. The vast majority of his fights occurred during the 1990s, and he held 3 heavyweight belts, beat Holyfield twice, and he was just really, really dominant despite the premature exit.
What are your thoughts on Riddick Bowe? The guy had some punching power.
Yeah, it's funny because, like you said, he tried to come back so many times. And so many times, my manager, Vinny, tried to get us to fight with him. But it just didn't happen.
So I want to ask you this. The biggest fight in the 90s should have been Riddick Bowe versus Lennox Lewis. It didn't happen. Who do you think would have won?
I'm gonna have to go with Riddick Bowe.
Oh, okay. That would have been a great fight to see. Well, let's move on to our second fighter here, and that is Lennox Lewis. So Lennox, he fought upright, which was kind of a unusual style at the time, but he has an incredible reach of 84. That is a long reach. Signature punch was the straight right hand, which was set up by his jab. He's considered one of the greatest punchers of all time. And I'm only going to talk about what he did in the 90s here. I'm not going to go into anything beyond that, but his record in the 90s, 37 fights with a record of 35-1-1. He had that draw against Holyfield, but then he beat him in the rematch, which also occurred in the 90s. He did beat Tyson, but that wasn't unfortunately until 2002, but he did beat him, just for the record. So in the 90s, he won the European and the British heavyweight titles, the Commonwealth title, the WBC, the IBC, the IBO heavyweight titles. He's won them all. His only loss came in 1994 to Oliver McCall, and he ended up avenging that loss in '87 and beating McCall. So during all this, he still had to be, in great shape to go and film Ocean's 11. He was in that, and he also aided the British Bulldog at SummerSlam in '92 to help in a match against Bret the Hitman Hart. So, but fighter of the year in '99, and George Foreman declared that Lewis was the greatest of all time after he had knocked out Mike Tyson. So, Peter, let me ask you, how do you fight a guy that's fighting an upright type of style like that with a reach of 84? How do you fight someone with that?
Well, my friend Gandhi, his was 86.
Oh, okay.
So it's very, mine's 74. So it's very difficult to fight somebody that height and reach.
Yeah. And with the sheer punching power coming in with that straight right hand that he does, I mean, is there any way to block that, to get out of the way? Like what's your best bet to survive that punch coming at you?
Well, I personally get right on him so to take that reach away from him. Once he's able to exercise that reach, to me the fight's over.
Right. Well, Kevin, why don't you tell us about Mike Tyson?
Mike Tyson, nicknamed Iron Mike, Kid Dynamite, the baddest man on the planet. He was known for his intimidation. I mean, the dude was ferocious in the ring. He also had some controversial behaviors, as we all know. He was a heavy hitter, though. His knockout to win percentage was 88%. He was ranked 16th on the Ring Magazine's list of 100 greatest punchers of all time. He was first on ESPN's list of hardest hitters in heavyweight history. Sky Sports described him as the most ferocious fighter to step in the ring. He was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame as well as the World Boxing Hall of Fame. A Bleacher Report had listed him as the #3 best boxer of the heavyweight class in the 1990s. He's one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. He was the undisputed heavyweight champion for 3 years in a row when he was entering the 90s. The man won his first 19 professional fights. 3 of them were in the first, or 12 of them, I'm sorry, were in the first round. Youngest boxer to ever win the heavyweight title. He also held the WBA, WBC, and IBF titles all at the same time. But in '92, we all know he got into some legal troubles, went to prison. But when he was released in '95, he had some comeback fights, including one against Peter here, which TV Guide listed that as it was on the list of the 50 greatest TV sports moments of all time in 1998. His first fight from the comeback grossed $96 million worldwide, including a record $63 million in the United States for pay-per-view. It also claimed the viewership and revenue records for pay-per-view. 1.5 million homes purchased his first comeback fight. He regained the WBA and WBC titles in '96 to join 5 other boxers as the only men in boxing history to regain a heavyweight championship after losing it. And then in 1997, we all know about the bite heard around the world, literally, when he bit Holyfield and lost his WBA title. He was also stripped of the WBC, unfortunately. But he finished his record 50-6, 44 knockouts. Of his fights in the 90s, he went 9-3. And let's face it, he still has the greatest boxing video game of all time.
So, Peter, let me ask you about Tyson here. When you found out you were going to be his first fight after getting out of prison there, what were your thoughts when you found that out?
Well, it was talked about for so long that I mean, I just did what I usually do and go right at him. But I was amazed at his speed, blinding fast speed, and I got hit with his best punch. In the end, the uppercut. Oh, yeah. To me, he was the greatest of all times.
And how did you deal with the hype for that match?
Oh, geez, it was really crazy. You know, the whole world descended on just to say that I was on Letterman, Leno, and Larry King Live alone. Shows you the magnitude of that fight.
Yeah. Brian, let me ask you real quick. So with Tyson, this will probably help with our decision in voting later. He kind of peaked in the 80s, didn't he?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he wasn't the same fighter after he got back. I mean, it was just, he was focused at times, when he was trying to get back up to that, level again. But then there was times where he was really distracted too. So, yeah, it definitely wasn't the same fighter in that second decade.
Well, let's move on to our final fighter tonight, and Rollo is going to be representing the real deal, Evander Holyfield.
Evander Real Deal Holyfield. He's the only one of this group that is the undisputed champion in two weight classes. He held the WBA and WBC and IBF titles from 90 to 92. He also held the WBA and IBF titles from 93 to 94 and the WBA title from 96 to 99. And he also held the IBF titles from 97 99. He went 13-4-1 during the 90s, but he beat everyone except for Lennox Lewis in the 90s. He beat George Foreman. He beat Michael Moorer. He beat Riddick Bowe. He beat Tyson twice, back to back. So his legend stands the test of time. He's very underrated when it comes to the names when you mention the greatest boxers of all time, but his record and the people he fought should show that he should be listed among the greatest of all time.
Peter, what are your thoughts on Holyfield?
I agree with him. I mean, the guy, if nothing else, the man had a great chin. He could box, he could punch, he could do it all.
Yeah. And he was another one that wouldn't retire. He just kept going and going and going.
Yeah, yes.
Kevin, let me ask you real quick, because you did represent Tyson. You mentioned the ear biting incident. What were your thoughts when you saw that go down?
Paper chew.
Paper chew.
Unfortunately, I think it damaged it damaged his legacy for sure, even more than what it was already prior to that. With all the troubles that he had going on in the 90s, just to add that into the mix, it was a disgrace to the sport, unfortunately, and I was shocked.
Well, let's jump into our vote here, guys. Cannot vote for your own. Brian, who are you taking?
I think I got to go on Lennox Lewis. I mean, that fight never happened, with him and Bowe, and that may have changed things. So I'll go with Lennox.
Rollo?
I actually know Lennox Lewis. So, and he beat my guy twice. He didn't beat him twice, but he did beat him once, and then had a decision. So I got to go with Lennox Lewis.
Okay. Kevin?
I'm actually going to go with Holyfield.
Okay. So with my vote, man, I was just looking at this. I agree that Tyson, I think he was the best if we were talking 1980s. I think it's hands down. If we were talking 1980s, he's the best, but I can't give it to him for the 90s. He had too many losses in the 90s. Holyfield, he did beat Bowe, but he lost twice to Bowe. So I got to give him a little under Bowe there. And, Holyfield lost to Lewis. So my vote is going to Riddick Bowe. Peter, who would you take as the best of the 90s?
Tyson.
Okay.
I have to, because he beat me.
There you go. So that's 2 votes for Lennox Lewis, 1 for Holyfield, 1 for Bowe. So win tonight for Tyson. Let's move into our Q&A for Peter about his career. And Peter, my first question for you is, how did you get hooked up with the endorsement for Pizza Hut after that Mike Tyson fight? Did they come to you? Did your promoter go to them?
Well, first it was and people don't remember this, but our first commercial was for AOL, America Online. And it was pretty cool doing it because the director was Ben Stiller.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, myself and Vinny worked side by side with Ben Stiller for like 9 hours.
Cool.
And then, obviously Pizza Hut got, both AOL and Pizza Hut got a hold of my guy Vinny, and that was how it all worked out. But I'm more known for the Pizza Hut commercial.
We'll go Kevin Rollo Bryan.
All right. Is there anybody that you wanted to box that you just didn't get to during your career?
Well, originally in September of '94, Don King Productions, I just signed a contract with Don King Productions in June. So in September, when McCall beat Lennox Lewis, it was announced that I was going to be the first title defense. But at the time, I was ranked 12th in the world, and the WBC stepped in and said, no. You have to be ranked in the top 10. So that fight, got scrapped, and it obviously, made room for the fight with Tyson.
Go ahead, Rollo.
Peter, how did you get started in boxing? What made you want to get into to boxing? And when did you have your first training and stuff like that?
It was a known thing that I am a 3rd generation pro boxer. My grandfather, Tom McNeely Sr., then more known, my father, Tom McNeely Jr., fought Floyd Patterson for the heavyweight championship of the world December 4th, 1961 in Toronto, Canada. And growing up, I still have the Sports Illustrated my dad was on the cover of, and Ring magazine. Still have them.
Nice.
But growing up in Medfield, Mass, where was I going to box, And when I was at Bridgewater State College, which is next to Brockton, the city of champions. So that's where boxing began for me in summer of '87. But things really got going after I went to the Petrelli gym in Brockton. And I only had 21 amateur fights. That's it. I met Vinny in summer of 1990 He needed a sparring partner for Paul Poirier. So I went down to Whitman next to Brockton and started sparring with Paul. And Vinny said to Cliff Fippen, who became my assistant trainer and cut man, he said to Cliff, we got to get this kid McNeely. He's the best young prospect heavyweight in the area, and kind of all just went from there. Things happen, for the good, the bad, and the ugly. And thank God it happened for the good for me.
Well, you had a couple of very impressive bouts, KOing a very good fighter, J.B. Williamson. You also took the WSBF title after KOing Mike Sams. Of course, you had the guts to get into the ring with Mike Tyson. For that, you've got my utmost respect. When you look back at your career, which bout would you say that you are the most proud of?
And I say this to people often. I'm proud of. We fought 37 fights in 44 months to get to Tyson.
Wow.
And that's, that was what we did. And I'm proud of that. I can't really claim too much else besides that.
Kevin, go ahead.
Tyson was my 38th fight, but at the end I had 54. I was lucky enough at near the end of my career to go to Copenhagen, Denmark, and fight Brian Nielsen, and then go to Cape Town, South Africa. It was my last pro fight. Seeing other parts of the world was pretty cool,
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Peter, who was a boxer that you kind of looked up to? I know you said you're third generational, so I'm sure your dad and grandfather are some boxers you looked up to, but outside of family, who was like a boxer that really motivated you and you looked up to?
Ali and Marvelous Marvin Hagler. My father took us to meet Marvin way down in Provincetown where Marvin trained. And it was pretty cool. My father knew Marvin. So Marvin was like, "Oh yeah, great, Tommy, come on in," and we saw him. That was one day, and another day we watched Marvin train.
Brian.
I mean, it doesn't get any better than Marvelous Marvin Hagler. You know what I mean?
Well, Peter, your pregame talk there, your pre-match talk before you fought Mike Tyson is something that's
Do you want me to do it right now?
Go for it, yeah.
From Hurricane Peter McNeely from Medfield, Mass. On Saturday night watching King Tyson's ass. If you haven't made your pay-per-view arrangements yet, make them soon. Because you know what happens when I wrap you in my cocoon.
Nice. I mean, were you trying to hype yourself up? Were you trying to intimidate Tyson? What was going on there?
I don't know. It just kind of all fit together,
Just kind of came out, huh?
Yeah.
Nice.
A guy said to me, probably a guy I played high school football with, Dave Fleming. He was the guy that came up with Cocoon of Horror. So that was, I said that one 10 days before the fight at a press conference in LA. And then, of course, before that the night before that press conference, I was on the Jay Leno show, which was in LA. And as far as knowing full well how you said the Tyson of the 80s was better, when I fought Mike Tyson in June of 95, he just turned 29, which is prime time for a heavyweight boxer.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, we could argue over that for hours. Well, who's better? Which Tyson was better at which time? But the Mike Tyson coming out of prison was a pretty tough customer to beat.
Yeah. So let me ask you then. You got 36 knockouts. So obviously you got a little more power than some people were expecting, because that's quite a few KOs in the amount of fights that you had. That's pretty impressive. So, what was your thoughts on your style of fighting, and were there some people who might have underestimated you?
Well, what people don't know is in only 21 amateur fights, I beat two #1 ranked USA ABF contenders, James Johnson and Bobby Harris. And they were top 5 USA ABF contenders at that time. So, when I met Vinny, he said, look, forget about, I had one last amateur fight with Vinny, and things just seemed to get better when Vinny took over my career at that point, as far as getting knockouts. And, one thing Vinny said was, Peter listens. He listened to me, and he does what I want him to do. And I just felt like, hey, this guy's gonna help my career. I better listen to him.
Right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on, Peter, and talking with us. We appreciate your time.
No problem. Thank you guys. I appreciate you having me on today.
I want to remind everybody, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button on whatever you're listening on. We'll see y'all next time. Everyone have a great night.